Welcome back. Let's discuss exempt versus non-exempt. What's the big deal? Well, I'm here to tell you it's a pretty big deal. You may have some employees that say, I'd rather be exempt so I don't have to clock in and clock out every day. Well, although it's a hassle to clock in and clock out, to come to work or to go to lunch, an employer does need to compensate and classify an employee appropriately so that they don't face significant financial penalties. As a supervisor, you may say the same thing. It's a hassle to monitor my employees' time. Let's just make them exempt. Well, hold on. Let's review the implications of that. So, how do organizations determine exemption status of employees? Well, there's three things. There's a salary basis, the salary level, and the job duties. Exempt employees must be paid on a salary basis, which means they receive the same amount of pay each pay period, regardless of the number of hours they work. Then you have the salary level test. The salary level requires that exempt employees earn a minimum salary level per week for them to be considered exempt. The salary level is subject to change, so it is important as an employer to stay up to date on the latest requirements. And then you have the job duties. So, exempt employees must also perform job duties that meet the requirements of one of the six FLSA exemptions for them to be exempt from overtime. The six exemptions are listed here. You have the executive, the administrative, professional, outside salesperson, computer employee, and a highly compensated employee exemption. So, how can employers protect themselves from running afoul of the FLSA overtime requirement? Employers should establish written policies. Policies should define the hours worked in a work week and if employees are paid weekly or biweekly based on their hours worked. When determining what a work week looks like, employers must identify whether the work week starts Monday through Friday, Tuesday through Saturday, and have that defined so that employees know what a typical or set standard work week looks like. I do want to note here that work weeks cannot be changed to manipulate overtime pay obligations. The only time a change to an employee's work week is permissible is if the change is intended to be permanent and is not designed to evade the overtime requirements of the FLSA. And then you also want to establish in your policy overtime standards. It is okay to require approval before an employee can take overtime, and overtime must be paid at least at the 1.5 times their hourly rate. It is also permissible to require approval again for the overtime, but if an employee doesn't have that overtime approval, you still have to pay them the overtime, but you can write them up for a policy violation if it's contained within your policy. So, how do employers address employee exemption status? One way you can do this is in job descriptions. The job description should state clearly that it is non-exempt or exempt. The job responsibilities should also rise up to the level of exempt from overtime if you are classifying that employee as exempt from overtime. Also, in your offer letters, you want to identify whether or not that job is paid on a salary basis or an hourly basis and define whether or not it is exempt or not exempt. Finally, you can explain what this means in your employee handbook as well. This ensures that employees know if they are non-exempt and can eliminate any confusion on their status. If an employee's exemption status changes based on the job duties test, it should be documented and validated appropriately. The employee should also be made aware of the change so that they aren't confused on why they are not receiving overtime any longer. So there are employees whose jobs are governed by the FLSA and they are either exempt or non-exempt. And that's the majority of the jobs nowadays. Simply speaking, employees' jobs are non-exempt if they are paid hourly and they are also eligible for overtime pay. Your employees are exempt from overtime if they are paid on a salary basis, regardless of the amount of hours that they work within a week.